Get out of my house, Corey. We're done.
Congratulations on the deal, Ariana.
Maybe give her some space, man. I'll pack a bag.
He turns, he walks, hands completely still. But in the bedroom, between old documents on a shelf, a folded note slips out. Her handwriting, dated over a year ago. Call attorney after $33 million deal closes. Need to prepare separate asset strategy if Corey makes things difficult. He reads it once, twice. He folds it, puts it in his bag, zips it shut. What she didn't know, what no one in that townhouse knew, was that the deal she was toasting with another man's arms around her, Corey had approved it. But how? And what he does next is the part that changes everything. My name is Corey. I'm 38 years old. For most of my life, I believed one simple thing. If you love someone well enough, long enough, and quietly enough, they will eventually see it. I was wrong. On a Tuesday evening in November, my wife kicked me out of our Gold Coast townhouse on North Dearborn Street, exactly 17 minutes after she signed a $33 million deal with Langston Global Technologies. She had a bottle of Dom Perignon in her hand. Another man's arm was wrapped around her waist, and she looked at me the way you look at something you tracked in on your shoe. What she didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that the deal she was celebrating, I had approved it. I had signed off on it, under a different name, through a consulting firm she didn't know existed. Her biggest victory was built on my invisible hands. And she had no idea. But we'll get to that. Psychologists call this invisible labor blindness, when one partner's contribution becomes so consistent that the other stops registering it as contribution at all. It becomes furniture, expected, unnoticed, until it's gone. The danger isn't that Ariana was ungrateful. Chicago in November is its own kind of cold. Not the dramatic movie blizzard kind, just steady, gray, and damp. The kind that gets inside your coat and stays there. I remember that morning like it was painted in slow motion. 6:15, same as always. I made coffee in the kitchen of the townhouse my wife and I had moved into 7 years earlier, back when she was still building Elevate Consulting out of a rented office on West Monroe Street, and I was the one staying up past midnight formatting her pitch decks and running the numbers she needed to walk into rooms with confidence. The coffee maker had a small crack in the carafe that I kept meaning to replace. I never did. It felt like hours, that crack, evidence of a life actually lived in. I stood at the window with my cup and watched the street below. A woman walked a fat beagle past the gate. A delivery truck rumbled around the corner. Normal. Quiet. Safe. I held on to those things the way you hold something you don't yet know you're about to lose. I was the IT manager at Lakewood Community College on the North Side. Steady work. Respectable. But what nobody at that college knew, and what Ariana herself had long stopped caring to know, was that I had also been running a consulting firm under my mother's name, James & Associates, after my middle name. In the beginning, it was barely a business, a side arrangement I'd had since before we married, modest enough that it never came up. My mother was the registered agent. What came through her accounts was hers to hold until I knew what I was building it for. That had been our arrangement from the start, and it didn't feel like a secret so much as a project. But over the last 18 months, the work had grown into something real, significant. Clients in 4 states. Due diligence reports on transactions worth more than some small towns. And by the time I understood what it was becoming, Ariana's family had made it clear enough times, in clear enough ways, that I'd decided. I would not hand them the satisfaction of knowing. Not yet. The money stayed separate. The LLC stayed in my mother's name, and I kept building, quietly, the way I did everything. When a person is consistently made to feel their worth is conditional, tied to income, status, or someone else's approval, they tend to do one of two things: collapse inward or quietly build. Corey built. That evening I came home early. The signing was supposed to be downtown at the Langston Global offices on South Wacker Drive. I hadn't expected anyone to be home, but the front door was unlocked, and from the hallway, I could already hear the champagne cork. I stepped into the living room. Ariana was laughing, bright and open, the way I hadn't seen in a long time. She wore the navy blazer she saved for her biggest moments. Her hair was perfect. She looked beautiful, honestly. She looked like everything she had worked for had just landed squarely in her hands. Then I saw him. Marcus Hale. 40 years old, expensive suit, the kind of man who enters a room as though he already owns the deed to it. His hand rested low on Ariana's back. Not colleague low, not friend low. She saw me, and the laughter stopped. "Corey, I didn't know you were home early." Not, "Honey, come celebrate." Not, "You won't believe what just happened." Just that, flat and careful. The voice of someone recalibrating, not someone surprised. I congratulated her. I meant it, God help me. She folded her arms across her chest. It took me a moment to notice. Her left hand, her ring finger, empty. "Corey, I want a divorce." Just like that. No prelude, no trembling.
She said it the way you announce a quarterly decision in a board meeting. Clean, final, already decided long before this room, long before this evening, long before I walked through that door. Marcus didn't speak. He just stood with a small, patient smile. The smile of a man watching a formality get completed. I went to the bedroom to pack. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I pulled a duffel bag from the closet shelf and moved slowly and deliberately, the way you do when your mind is working too hard to let the rest of you shake. Then a folded piece of paper slipped out from between a stack of old documents on the shelf. Ariana's handwriting. The date at the top, more than a year ago. Call attorney after $33 million deal closes. Need to prepare separate asset strategy if Corey makes things difficult. I read it twice. Then I sat down on the edge of the bed, just for a moment, my hands in my lap, the note between my fingers, the sound of Ariana and Marcus talking softly in the living room, drifting down the hall like something from someone else's life. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds and let it be exactly as bad as it was. Then I stood up. I folded the note carefully and put it in the front pocket of my bag, and I finished packing. Notice the phrasing, if Corey makes things difficult, not if Corey is hurt, not if Corey deserves more. The framing strips him of humanity and recasts him as an obstacle to manage. Psychologists call this dehumanizing rationalization. Reducing a person to a problem so the conscience doesn't have to account for them. She hadn't just decided tonight. She had been planning this for over a year, building her exit strategy while I was still bringing her coffee in bed on Sunday mornings. I zipped the bag. I could hear them talking softly in the living room. I did not try to listen. I walked out of the bedroom, down the hallway, past the living room without turning my head, and out the front door into the cold November street. I did not look back. The maple tree stood bare at the curb. The streetlights were just starting to flicker on. I stood on the sidewalk with my bag at my feet, breathed in the cold air, and let one thought settle quietly into place. She has no idea what she just set in motion.
Here's what I want to ask you right now. Do you think Corey should have walked out quietly? Or should he have said everything right there in that living room? Type 1 if you think his silence was strength. Type 2 if you think he should have spoken up. Or tell me, have you ever stayed quiet when every part of you wanted to speak? Because what happens next will make you rethink everything you just answered. My father, Raymond Thompson, has lived in the same brick bungalow on North Paulina Street in Rogers Park for 31 years. The porch swing out front has needed a new hinge since the early 90s, and he's never once been in a hurry about it. He says a creaking swing keeps you humble. Standing at his front door that November night with a duffel bag and no real plan, I finally understood what he meant. He opened the door before I could knock. He'd seen my headlights from the window. He didn't ask a single question. He simply stepped aside, went to the kitchen, and made us both a cup of tea with way too much sugar, the way he always did. And we sat at his old kitchen table under the overhead light that made everything look a little warmer than it actually was. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting once. When I finished, he wrapped both hands around his mug and looked at me the way a father does when he's choosing his words like he's choosing tools for a delicate job. Don't let anybody make you feel small, son. We build homes on respect, not on who makes more money. Simple words, but in that kitchen, at that hour, they reached somewhere deep. Psychology note. What Raymond offered his son was mere dignity, reflecting a person's worth back to them at the exact moment they can no longer see it themselves. Then my father set his mug down and cleared his throat. There's something I should have told you sooner. About 5 weeks ago, Ariana's brother Deshaun called me. He was asking questions, whether you had private investments, accounts outside your college salary. I didn't answer him. But the way he was asking, Corey, it wasn't casual. They were looking for something specific. And they were looking before that deal was even signed. I sat very still. 5 weeks ago, that meant my wife's family had been quietly investigating me, mapping my finances, looking for weaknesses, while she was still wearing her ring in public. While she was still texting me from business trips to say she missed me. While I was still packing her carry-on for her early flights. Psychology note. When one partner begins quietly surveilling the other's finances while maintaining the outward appearance of a normal marriage, psychologists call it a form of coercive control. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my father's guest room, same pale blue walls I'd had as a teenager, same cedar smell from the closet, and stared at the ceiling and let the full shape of it settle over me. This was not a woman who had fallen out of love and made a painful decision. This was a plan, organized, deliberate, timed to the closing of a deal I had unknowingly helped approve. The next morning at the college, HR confirmed my promotion to IT director. $92,000 annually, effective immediately. Good news arriving on the worst week of my life, sitting in my hands like something I didn't know what to do with yet. Patricia, the HR coordinator, the one who kept a dish of peppermint candies on her desk without fail, congratulated me warmly. Then she lowered her voice. I want to mention something that may feel relevant now. About 3 months ago, we received a formal records inquiry from a law firm. They cited Ariana's company name on the letterhead. And separately, about 6 weeks ago, there was a direct phone call from a Marcus Hale asking questions about college IT staff. That call is what concerned me. I didn't flag it at the time, but I should have. I thanked her. She offered a peppermint. I took it automatically and carried it the whole walk back to my office. Never unwrapped it. Marcus Hale had called the college, personally. 6 weeks before the divorce was announced. He hadn't just been helping Ariana plan a departure. He'd been working to preemptively damage the only ground I had to stand on. That call was about establishing what I earned, what I was worth professionally, and how much noise I might be able to make before they could stop me. Psychology note. There's a term for this kind of maneuvering: financial ambush. The goal is to ensure the other party enters the process already defeated, stripped of documentation, credibility, and leverage before the first filing is even made. That night at my father's kitchen table, I opened my laptop and started pulling threads. Old emails, financial records from the years I'd managed Ariana's early company accounts, consulting documents from James & Associates. Before I did, I thought briefly about a Saturday 8 months earlier. Ariana's personal assistant, a quiet woman named Dana, had texted me on a weekend to say her work laptop had crashed and she had a Monday deadline. Ariana was out of town. I drove over to Dana's apartment on the north side and fixed it in about an hour. She offered to pay me. I told her not to worry about it. It was just the kind of thing I did. I hadn't thought about Dana since. Then, at 11:47 that night, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. 4 words. She thinks you're broken. Don't make this easy for her. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't recognize the number, but something in the phrasing made me pause. It was the kind of thing someone sends when they've been watching from very close range and have decided it's finally time to speak. I filed it away. I had enough to deal with already. I went back to the laptop. What I found over the next 3 hours was worse than I expected and exactly as bad as I feared. 18 months earlier, Ariana had accidentally included me on a forwarded email chain. She'd meant to send it to her attorney and hit reply all. I had archived it without reading closely. That night, I opened it and read every word. They had been planning the divorce for 14 months. Ariana's mother had been involved from the beginning. Deshawn had been running the financial surveillance. And their attorney had drafted a settlement offer so deliberately low it bordered on insulting. A number calculated not to reflect fairness, but to reflect exactly how much they believed I would fight back. One line from the attorney's memo read, "Given his salary and the absence of documented outside income, our assessment is that he will accept rather than litigate." I read that sentence 3 times. Psychology note. This is weaponized perception. Ariana's legal team hadn't just made assumptions about Corey's finances. They'd made assumptions about his character, betting he was the kind of man who'd absorb injustice quietly. They were almost right. The difference was a consulting firm registered under a different name, and 3 years of quiet, invisible building. My father came into the kitchen around midnight. He saw the look on my face, said nothing, put one hand briefly on my shoulder, and went back to bed. That was all I needed. I closed the laptop. I sat in the stillness of that old kitchen, the refrigerator humming, the porch swing creaking faintly in the November wind outside, and made a decision. Not revenge. That was never in me. But I was done being invisible to the people who had spent 14 months counting on my invisibility to protect them. The truth was already out there. I just needed to make sure I was standing upright when it arrived. 3 days after I left North Dearborn Street, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was measured and unhurried. The voice of someone who had made very consequential decisions for a very long time and was no longer anxious about any of them. "Mr. Thompson, my name is Victor Langston. I believe we have something important to discuss." Victor Langston, CEO of Langston Global Technologies, the man whose company had just signed the $33 million contract with my wife's firm. We agreed to meet the next morning. He had reserved a private dining room at the Langham Chicago on East Wabash Avenue, the kind of place where conversations don't carry to the next table. I arrived 10 minutes early. The room was quiet and small, just the two of us and a low table set with coffee I didn't touch. I sat by the window and watched the river below and waited. Victor arrived exactly on time. Tall, silver at the temples, dark wool coat, no tie. He shook my hand briefly, sat across from me, and placed a manila folder on the table between us without opening it. "I'm going to be direct with you, Mr. Thompson, because I believe you've earned that." He opened the folder and pushed it toward me. Photographs, time-stamped messages, hotel lobby records from Chicago, from Atlanta, from a Dallas conference Ariana had described to me as strictly client-facing. 3 days ago, Langston Global received an anonymous email. It contained documentation of a personal relationship between Ariana Thompson and Marcus Hale, the strategic advisor who represented Elevate throughout our negotiation. The relationship appears to have been ongoing for approximately 6 months, overlapping with the entire contract period. I had suspected. In that quiet, cellular way that married people sometimes know things before they're ready to name them. But seeing it documented, time-stamped, printed, inarguable, was its own particular weight. Grief and confirmation arriving in the same breath. What Corey experienced has a name in trauma psychology: confirmation collapse. The grief arrives not when we first suspect a betrayal, but when the last possibility of being wrong disappears. I closed the folder and set it back on the table. "I'm sorry," Victor said, and he genuinely meant it. Not performed sympathy, the quiet acknowledgement of a man who recognized the terrain. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and set a small digital recorder on the table. There's something else. A secondary recording was included in the same communication. Our legal team has reviewed it carefully. The person who sent this email was a direct participant in the call. She was on the line when these statements were made, which under Illinois law makes the recording lawful. We've been advised we can use it as context for a governance review, though not as evidence in any legal proceeding. What matters today is what it establishes about intent. He pressed play. 40 seconds. Marcus Hale's voice filling the small room. Confident, casual. The voice of a man who believed completely he was speaking in private. "Once the deal closes, we handle the IT guy cleanly. I've got someone watching his accounts already. If we need to, we ruin his reputation at the college. Get him discredited before the divorce goes public. He won't have anywhere to stand." The recording ended. The room was very quiet. My jaw tightened so hard it ached. I made myself release it. I made myself breathe slowly, set my hands flat on the table, and look out the window at the river below, gray and moving, indifferent and steady, until the silence in the room settled back to something I could sit inside without breaking. Then I looked down at my hands. They were still. It had taken something to make them that way, but they were still. Psychology note. Marcus Hale's plan was a dual-threat strategy, attacking both the financial and reputational pillars of a target's life at once. Destroy the income documentation, destroy the professional credibility, and the person enters divorce proceedings with nothing to negotiate from. He had a coordinated plan to neutralize you professionally and financially before you could respond, Victor said quietly. The goal was to make sure you entered the divorce with nothing to stand on. Then he leaned back and looked at me with something I hadn't expected. Not pity. Measured respect. The kind you extend carefully to someone you're still quietly evaluating. "Mr. Thompson, we know who you are. Both of who you are." He paused. "You are Corey Thompson, Ariana's husband, and you are also Corey James, the senior consultant retained by Langston Global through James & Associates LLC, registered under your mother's name. You analyzed Elevate Consulting Group and issued the formal approval that put this contract in motion. The anonymous email included more than photographs. It included your name, Corey James, James & Associates, cited as the consultant who approved the Elevate deal. The sender had access to Ariana's business correspondence and found your name on the contract months before any of this came to a head. Once we had the name, the LLC search took our team 40 minutes. The methodology in your reports matched work our senior analyst had seen under that name on a prior engagement 2 years ago. Everything confirmed. He paused again. James and Associates came onto the Langston roster 8 months ago. Long after, it now appears, your wife had already set her other plans in motion. The opportunity arose independently on Elevate's side. You happened to be the consultant already on our retainer when their proposal crossed our desk, and you evaluated it on its merits. You had no way of knowing the company you were approving belonged to the woman who was planning to leave you. He looked at me steadily. That is either the most painful coincidence I've seen in 30 years of business, or the universe has a very particular sense of order. Ariana built her exit on the assumption that Corey was less than she needed him to be. A college salary, a quiet demeanor, a man who didn't push back. What she couldn't see was the parallel life he'd built in the space her underestimation had created. Then came the question I had known was inevitable. I have to ask you directly, Mr. Thompson, do you want us to cancel this contract? If any part of what you're feeling is about retaliation, I need you to tell me now. I cannot build a $33 million commitment on someone else's pain. He held up one hand before I could answer. I also need to be transparent. Given the conflict of interest, you cannot serve in a consulting capacity at tomorrow's meeting. Our legal team has been clear on that. The due diligence you completed stands entirely on its own record. It doesn't need your advocacy. What I'm asking is something different. He looked at me directly. I want you in that room as the author of the work Ariana is about to see on that projector. Not to argue a case, not to consult. To stand next to what you built and let it speak. The disclosure is on record. There's nothing improper about a witness being present at the review of his own work. I looked out at the river below. A barge was moving slowly south, loaded and unhurried. Part of me wanted to see the whole thing collapse. Every dollar, every press release, every congratulatory message from her mother and her brother who had spent months quietly dismantling me. That part of me was real. I won't pretend otherwise. But I had learned a long time ago not to make permanent decisions on behalf of temporary pain. I turned back to Victor. Part of me does want to see it fall. I won't lie to you. But Langston Global deserves to make this decision on real business grounds, not on my grief. The work I completed was honest. That distinction is yours to make, not mine. Victor looked at me for a long moment. Then he set the folder aside and let out one slow breath. Can you be in Dallas tomorrow? I looked at him across that small private room in the gray November light coming off the river, in a city that had spent 3 days quietly breaking my heart, and said the only thing I had left in me to say. Yes. I packed one bag for Dallas, my father's watch, one good shirt, my laptop. The flight left O'Hare at 6:15 the next morning. I watched Chicago disappear into the clouds and let myself feel, fully and completely, everything I had been holding at arm's length for 3 days. Then I folded it away, neatly, like a letter you keep but no longer need to reread. Tomorrow, Ariana would walk into a boardroom and find me already seated at the table. And the name on the most important pages in the room, the pages that had made her deal possible, would be mine. The Langston Global offices occupy the 23rd floor of a glass tower on McKinney Avenue in uptown Dallas. Floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread below like a blueprint of ambition. A conference table long enough that you have to lean forward to see the other end. I arrived at 9:45. Charcoal gray button-down, good slacks, my father's watch on my left wrist. Nothing more. I took the seat Victor indicated near the center of the table, facing the door, folded my hands in front of me, and waited. At 10 o'clock exactly, the conference room door opened. Ariana walked in wearing the navy suit, the tailored one from Michigan Avenue, the one she reserved for meetings she called the ones that matter. Portfolio under her arm, posture perfect, stride carrying the full authority of a woman who expected every room to receive her on her own terms. Marcus Hale followed a half step behind. She was already extending her hand toward Victor, smile assembled and professional, when her eyes traveled the length of the table and landed on my face. The smile did not fall. It froze, completely and instantly, like a photograph taken at exactly the wrong moment. 3 full seconds of absolute stillness. Her hand suspended in the air. Victor mid-reach. Marcus pausing behind her. The court reporter's stenography machine ticking softly in the corner, indifferent to all of it. Then her hand dropped. What happened in those 3 seconds is what psychologists call a schema rupture. The moment reality fails to match the mental model a person has been operating from. She'd walked in carrying a story. She was the CEO, this was her deal. Corey was someone already managed and moved past. In 3 seconds, every part of that story collapsed at once. Victor moved smoothly, as though nothing unusual had occurred. Miss Thompson, Mr. Hale, thank you for making the trip. Please, sit down. They sat. Ariana chose a seat diagonally across from me. She did not look at me again. Her jaw was set, her expression carefully managed, and nearly successful, except for the leather portfolio pressed flat against the table beneath both her palms, holding something steady that wanted very much to tremble. Victor opened the meeting without ceremony. Before we move to business, I want to make one introduction. This is Corey James, Senior Consultant with James & Associates LLC, retained by Langston Global throughout the evaluation and approval process for this contract. He was the primary analyst on the Elevate Consulting due diligence report. He's here today as a witness to the integrity of that work, not in a consulting capacity. Our legal team has noted the conflict of interest, and it's on record. He won't be speaking to the business case. He'll simply be present while the board reviews the documentation. He paused. Corey James is also, as some of you may now be piecing together, Corey Thompson, Ms. Thompson's husband. One board member set his pen down carefully. Another shifted in her chair. The court reporter's machine kept ticking, steady, impartial, unbothered. Victor picked up his remote. The projector came to life. On the screen, the full due diligence report, 47 pages. And there, on the cover, on the executive summary, on the financial risk assessment, on the leadership evaluation, the name Corey James, with my signature below it, page after patient, deliberate, invisible page. Ariana had built her departure on the belief that Corey was peripheral, a supporting character at most. Those 47 pages said something no argument ever could. He was never peripheral. She just wasn't looking. Victor advanced to page 31. Leadership Risk Assessment, dated 2 months prior. He read aloud, calm as a man reading weather data. The CEO's recent decision-making reflects possible influence from a personal relationship with a business partner. Recommend follow-up governance assessment prior to final contract execution. The room was very quiet. Ariana's eyes moved from the screen to me, slowly, as if the motion itself required effort. I held her gaze. I did not look away. I did not offer anger, or apology, or comfort. I simply looked at her the way you look at someone you once loved completely and honestly. And that fact alone was the heaviest thing in the room. Victor clicked to a new screen. A video call recording. Split frame. Timestamp from 3 weeks prior. The board has reviewed the following recording, received through the same anonymous communication. This will be played in its entirety. He pressed play. Marcus Hale's voice filled the room. Confident, casual. The voice of a man who believed completely he was speaking privately. After the deal closes, we pressure him to sign whatever papers we need. If he refuses, we move to Plan B, damage his reputation at the college. I already have someone positioned. Once he's discredited, the divorce settlement writes itself. He won't know what hit him. 38 seconds. Then silence. Watch Ariana in this moment. When Marcus's voice fills the room, she doesn't look at the screen. She looks at Marcus. What crosses her face isn't the anger of a woman caught in someone else's scheme. It's the recognition that she was never a partner in this plan. She was its instrument. Marcus hadn't been conspiring with her. He'd been conspiring through her. Ariana turned and looked at Marcus. Slowly, completely, with an expression I had never seen on her face in 8 years of marriage. Not fury, but something colder and more devastating. The look of a person who has just understood, with full clarity and in front of witnesses, that the man beside her had never been building something with her. He'd been building something through her, around her, and eventually entirely without her. One of the Langston attorneys spoke evenly. Mr. Hale, given the content of this recording and the undisclosed personal relationship maintained throughout the negotiation period, Langston Global is asking that you remove yourself from this meeting and from any further representation of Elevate Consulting Group in this matter. Effective immediately. Marcus started to speak, stopped. He looked at Ariana once, searching for something, an alliance, a lifeline, any signal at all. She did not look back at him. He stood. He buttoned his jacket with the deliberate care of a man trying to preserve the last fragment of his dignity. He walked to the door. It closed behind him with a soft, clean click. One empty chair. The court reporter's machine kept ticking. Even in collapse, the performance continued. He was never in this for love or loyalty. He was in it for position. When the position was gone, all that was left was the careful buttoning of a jacket. Ariana sat for a moment with her hands flat on the table. Then she straightened her spine. I watched her physically collect herself from the inside out and turned to Victor. What are Langston's conditions? Victor outlined them without ceremony. A full independent governance audit of Elevate's contracting process, conducted by a third-party firm of Langston's choosing. A formal written termination of Marcus Hale's involvement with any Langston-facing work, effective immediately, and Ariana's personal cooperation with the compliance review as the signatory CEO. Then he added one more thing, and this one was not a demand. You may choose to step back from day-to-day operations during the audit period. Some CEOs find that useful, some don't. That's entirely your decision. What's not optional is the audit itself and the removal of Mr. Hale. Ariana listened without interrupting. 2 precise, professional questions about the audit scope and timeline. Then, one single nod. I'll accept your conditions. The board began to rise, gathering papers, exchanging quiet words. And in the middle of all of it, Ariana and I were the 2 still points in a moving room. She looked at me, just for a moment. Her eyes were dry, but barely, held there by sheer will. I held her gaze one last second. Then I gathered my materials, said a quiet word to Victor, and walked out into the hallway. As the elevator doors slid open, I caught one last glimpse through the glass wall of the conference room. Ariana, sitting alone at the long table, portfolio still closed in front of her. The projector still glowing with page after page of a report I had written months before my marriage ended. My name, my work, the invisible foundation of a celebration that had been built without knowing I was in the room. The doors closed. I breathed. Just breathed. They asked me to wait in a smaller room down the hall while the board finalized the paperwork. I sat with a glass of water, my phone face down on the table, and looked out at the Dallas skyline. trying to locate something in myself I could name cleanly. It wasn't relief exactly. It wasn't satisfaction. It was closer to the feeling you get when you've been carrying something very heavy for a long time, and someone has finally said, "You can set that down now." You still feel the weight in your shoulders. Your hands are just empty at last. About 20 minutes later, a single knock at the door. Ariana stepped inside. Alone. No portfolio, no professional armor of any kind. Just her, in the navy suit with the collar slightly undone, reduced to her actual human size. She stood in the doorway for a moment. Then she held up her phone, briefly, just enough for me to see it. I called my attorney from the hallway, before I came to find you. She set the phone face down on the table as she sat. I told her to withdraw the original settlement offer. I told her to prepare something fair. She folded her hands on the table. I want you to know I didn't do that because of what just happened in that boardroom. I've been moving toward it for 3 weeks, since I found what Marcus had tried to sign away behind my back. That was the moment I understood what I'd actually been building my life around. Not freedom, not ambition. A man who saw everything in my world as an asset to be extracted, including me, including my company, including you. She looked at me directly. I wanted you to know it was my decision. Not consequence, not legal pressure. Mine. Psychology note. Therapists call this the drop, when a person who has maintained a performance under extreme pressure finally releases it. I sat with that for a long moment. Outside, Dallas glittered in the midday sun, indifferent and radiant. There was a version of this moment I could have used as a weapon. The irony of it, that she'd protected herself from Marcus using something I had given her, while simultaneously using a plan designed to leave me with nothing. That irony had edges. I could feel them. But I'll be honest, hearing her say it cost me something. Not anger, something more complicated. The particular grief of recognizing that the best of what you gave someone was still working inside them, protecting them, long after they had stopped protecting you. I let that feeling move through me completely. Then I set it down. I don't want to destroy you, Ariana, I said. I never did. I just need you to understand what you threw away. She absorbed that without deflecting. She let it land all the way to the floor. After a long pause, 3 weeks before the deal closed, Marcus came to me with paperwork. Restructuring documents, he said. Standard procedure before a major contract. He needed my signature on a few asset transfer forms. I skimmed them. I signed one without reading it carefully enough. She looked down at her hands. 2 days later, I read what I had actually signed. A partial transfer of Elevate's equity holdings into a personal account in Marcus's name. I had my attorney reverse it within 48 hours. He doesn't know I caught it. A pause. There's something you said to me years ago, back when I almost took a partnership with someone whose books didn't add up. You told me, never let anyone use emotion to take what doesn't belong to them. That's the line I heard in my head when I read those papers. That's the only reason I still have a company today. Your words were what saved me from the man I chose over you. Psychology note. Psychologists call this embedded mentorship. Influence so consistent and quietly delivered that the recipient doesn't realize they're carrying it until the moment they most need it. Ariana had absorbed Corey's judgment, his values, his way of seeing. When she stood at the edge of losing everything, it was Corey's voice she heard, not Marcus's confidence or her own ego. The cruelest irony in the story isn't that Corey built her deal. It's that he built the very instinct that kept her from being destroyed by the man she chose instead of him. She nodded once. She stood. She smoothed her jacket, slowly, the way a person reassembles themselves when they have to keep going, and this is the only way they know how. At the door, she stopped. She didn't turn around. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about what quiet means. I mistook it for weakness. And I made that mistake about the one person who never once gave me a reason to. Then she walked out. I sat alone in that room for a long time. The water went warm. The skyline kept glittering. I thought about my father's kitchen table, about the cracked carafe, about 7 years of Sunday mornings and airport goodbyes, and late nights spent building a life that I had apparently been building alone for longer than I realized. My phone rang. Lena Washington, the attorney I'd retained after my second night at my father's house. Sharp, efficient, no patience for softening. Corey, Ariana had already called her counsel. New instructions. Withdraw the original offer. Illinois had been efficient. I filed the moment her attorney confirmed the settlement figures, and with no contested terms, the court cleared it within the standard window. 6 months was enough, just barely, for everything to be finalized. She paused. She said, and I'm quoting her directly, "Give him what is fair. He deserves it." I closed my eyes for just a moment. Fair. After 14 months of coordinated planning, after the records inquiries, the surveillance, the settlement number crafted to leave me with nothing, after all of it, she had arrived, at last, at the word fair. Psychology note. Fairness isn't simply a preference, it's a fundamental human need. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something quieter and more complicated. The particular ache of a truth that arrives just in time to clarify everything, and just too late to save anything. Thank you, Lena. I hung up. I put on my jacket. I picked up my bag, walked to the elevator, and pressed the button for the lobby. Going down. And for the first time since a Tuesday evening in November on North Dearborn Street, I did not feel like I was falling.
6 months later, I was living in Dallas on Lowest Greenville Avenue, second floor.
Big east-facing windows that filled the apartment with morning light. Warm and steady and generous, the way good things tend to arrive once you've stopped bracing for the next blow. A solid kitchen, a reading chair I found at an estate sale one Saturday, and drove home in a borrowed pickup truck. I had accepted a permanent position at Langston Global as a senior strategy consultant. My real name on the contract this time, both names, finally the same man. I called my mother the week I signed the offer letter and told her everything. The LLC, James & Associates, what it had quietly become over 3 years of early mornings and careful, invisible work. She went silent for a moment, the way she did when something moved her all the way down. Then she said, "Baby, I always knew you were carrying more than you let on." I laughed, a real laugh. Psychology note. This is what positive psychologists call post-traumatic growth. Not bouncing back to where you were before, but arriving somewhere genuinely new, with more clarity, more self-knowledge, and a more honest understanding of what you need and what you're actually worth. My father came to Dallas in March for a week. He sat in my reading chair and declared it the finest piece of furniture he had seen in 20 years, which, from a man who has kept the same creaking porch swing for over 3 decades without once considering a replacement, I accepted as the highest possible honor. We ate barbecue on Elm Street. We walked the Katy Trail on a cool Tuesday morning without saying much, which was its own kind of conversation. On his last evening, watching the sun go down from my window, he said quietly, "You know the difference between surviving something and healing from it? Surviving means you make it to the other side. Healing means you stop checking over your shoulder to see if it's still following you." I thought about that for a long time after he went home. I was still working on the not looking back part, but I was further along than I had been. About a month after my father's visit, I flew back to Chicago for a work meeting on Michigan Avenue. I had a few free hours in the afternoon and walked through the loop the way I used to. Hands in my pockets, no particular destination, just moving through the city and letting it move around me. I saw her outside a coffee shop on West Washington Street, Ariana, sitting alone at an outdoor table despite the April chill. A simple cream sweater, no leather portfolio, an ordinary black coffee held in both hands. She looked human, genuinely, unguardedly human, in a way the woman I had lived with for 8 years had carefully and deliberately armored herself against. She saw me in the same instant I saw her. The city moved around us, cabs, cyclists, a group of tourists photographing City Hall, and in the middle of all of it, we stood still for one moment, two people holding the full weight of what had been between them. I walked over. I asked if I could sit for a few minutes. She nodded. She told me the audit had concluded cleanly, that she'd return as CEO the following month. Her voice was steady, but the performance was entirely gone. No polish. No positioning, just the plain facts of where things stood, stated by someone who had finally run out of reasons to manage them. Then she wrapped both hands tighter around her cup and looked out at the street. I found out 2 months ago that Marcus had been involved with someone else from the very beginning. My company was a platform to him, my connections, my credibility, my access. That was all it ever was. He was never building anything with me. He was building something through me, and eventually completely away from me. A pause. And that anonymous email that started everything, the photographs, the recording, I assumed someone sent it to help you. I was wrong. She looked at me. It was Dana, my assistant. The woman whose laptop you fixed for free on a Saturday morning, 8 months before any of this happened. She'd gone through my company files weeks earlier, looking, she later told someone, for anything she could use against Marcus. What she found instead was the Langston contract and your name on it. She filed that away and waited for the right moment. She sent that email to destroy Marcus, not to help you. We were just the story he happened to be standing in when she was ready to move. She looked at me with the brightness of someone holding back something that wants very much to spill over. I destroyed my own marriage with my own hands. I chose ambition, and I chose wrong. And it turns out I was a pawn in someone else's game the entire time. In every direction I looked, I chose the wrong person. Psychology note. Ariana is describing the simultaneous collapse of 2 betrayals, the one she committed and the one she suffered. Both are true, and neither cancels the other. I sat with all of that. The city moved around us. A pigeon walked in small, determined circles near our table. Someone's phone rang nearby and went to voicemail. The world just kept going. I did not comfort her. That would have been dishonest, and she deserved better than that, even now. But I had no cruelty left in me either. I'd set it down somewhere, on the 23rd floor of a glass tower in Dallas, and I had no interest in going back for it. I hope you find peace, Ariana. I genuinely mean that. She nodded once. She looked back out at West Washington Street. I stood up, put my hand briefly on the back of the empty chair beside me, not on her shoulder, just the chair, and walked away into the April afternoon. I did not look back. Not once. That night, back in Dallas, I opened my phone and found the unknown number, Dana's, though I'd never confirmed it and didn't need to now. I deleted it. I sat in my reading chair by the east window. The Dallas sunset was doing something extraordinary, deep orange bleeding into rose, and at the very edge of the horizon, the thinnest line of violet, like the last word at the end of a very long sentence. I watched it the way you watch something beautiful that you know will not last. And I thought about what my father had said the last time we talked on the phone, while I was making dinner and he was half watching a game, and we were talking, the easy way we talk when there is nothing left to prove. The best thing about the truth, son, is that it doesn't need you to defend it.
It just needs you to be standing next to it. I think that's right. I think that is exactly right. This story reminds us of something most of us already know but rarely say out loud. That the person who does the most is often the last one anyone thinks to thank. Maybe you know someone like Corey. Maybe you've been someone like Corey. The one who fixed things quietly, who showed up without being asked, who folded your hurt away each morning like a letter no one ever read. If that's you, here is what I want you to do tonight. Not tomorrow, tonight. Find one small thing in your home that belongs entirely to you. A chipped mug, a worn cookbook, a chair by a window where the light comes in just right in the afternoon. Sit with it, not to process anything, not to make peace with anything, just to notice that it's yours, that it fits your hand, that no one else's opinion of it changes what it means to you.
That is where self-respect actually lives. Not in a courtroom, not in a boardroom, not in the moment someone finally admits they were wrong. It lives in the quiet Tuesday evening when you realize you know exactly who you are. And that is enough. The soul of these stories comes from human experience, empathy, and courage. AI assisted only in language refinement so that timeless lessons of justice, compassion, and standing up against wrong could move and educate viewers everywhere. Production team, story and screenplay by Quinn Fung. Character development and visual conceptualization by Chris Nguyen. Video scripting and scene adaptation by David Nguyen. A passionate team dedicated to bringing this story to life.